Hello and welcome to another edition of Irish Rewind. As always, I'm Dalton, joined by George. George, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, Dalton. Good to be back with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited for our second episode here. Thanks everybody for tuning back in. We'll jump right into it here with a little bit of women's basketball. George, what's the latest?
Well, you kind of jinxed them last week, Dalton. You asked what if the women can win out the next six games, and they go and drop their their first game there of the six that are remaining, and they lost to Miami at Coral Gables, 72-65.
What led to that, George? We watched them Sunday, and they were so dominant, and then to see them go out and lose to a Miami team, it was just really unexpected. There's got to be a reason behind it.
Well, numbers don't lie. Numbers will not lie here, folks. They were 3 of 14 from three-point range. Overall, 22 of 59. The biggest problem for this team continues to be their turnovers. Turnovers is killing this team, and we remember that Coach McGraw had actually discussed that in last week's press conference. So ball control continues to be the thorn in this team's side.
So the good news is right after they dropped that disappointing loss against Miami, and they come out yesterday and they pretty handily defeat Florida State. What happened there, and how did they rebound?
They did fairly well. First of all, today was a really special game at Purcell Pavilion. Today was their Pink Zone game, is when they celebrate the survivors of cancer. They call it the Pink Zone, and they come out and they have names on the back of a T-shirt. Some folks had stuff written on shoes. I know Coach had, some words written on her shoes. So it was a special day for them, and it really gave them something to come out and really want to come out of the box and score pretty quick today on Sunday.
Well, one thing I'm noticing, and correct me here if I'm wrong, but do you think that they maybe rely too heavily on Enrique?
Well, that's actually a great part of the problem. I think is Ben Enrique. She's been off to a slow start, basically almost the entire second half of the season, where she's really not getting it going from in the third or fourth quarters. And yesterday's game, she came out of the gates and she was dropping buckets. She was doing phenomenal in that first quarter. She came out and she was 4 of 7 for field goals. One of them was a 3-pointer. So she had 9. She came out and got her points. She had 9 points going on out of the first quarter, including a 3. So
you look at a game like Miami and she only scores, I think, 13 points total. And Notre Dame struggles, but then, flip the script at Florida State. She drops 27, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists, and they blow out a very, very good Seminoles team. So it's almost like when she rolls, they roll.
Yes, and I think there may have been some discussions afterwards. In an article that I had just recently posted, I think that this team to date, they've been kind of struggling with this whole what happened last year. They had red carpets, they had award ceremonies, Dancing with the Star appearances, and it's almost like a hangover, but it's not. But it's kind of looking that way, that they expected to win, because on paper this team is legit, and the way that they've been playing, they've just not been playing up to their level. So I think that they had some type of a little hangover going on. But if you're going to start playing, it better be now.
So to avoid jinxing them again, if anybody upstairs is listening, George, do you think that this is a scenario where they get to, the big dance and they really turn it on and they dominate everybody they play? Or could we see them slip up like they have in a few games this year and get knocked out without a chance to really defend their national title?
Well, I'm going to peel the onion back one layer. It's going to be really what comes out of the ACC tournament. Right now, they're not going to win, most likely not going to win the ACC regular season. But I think that their ACC tournament play is really going to be their foundation of how well they do in the NCAA tournament. So I think if they're going to get strong, they got to do it now. You got to get everyone in a groove, and no better time than the present.
Well, moving right along, let's get into hockey. They had that break this week. Off that break coming into this coming week, they have a lot of big games. George, can you break that down for us?
Yeah, well, a lot of other teams played while Notre Dame had a bye. Michigan is back into second place with conference points of 30 behind Ohio State, who has 41. Minnesota has 27. Penn State has 26. And Notre Dame is sitting just above Michigan State with 25 points. So currently ranked 5 in the Big Ten Conference. They got some games remaining, but they're not going to win the regular season conference award this year. But they're making strides. The Coach Jackson is talking about what lines he's going to keep and what he's feeling more and more comfortable with as these lines are starting to come together and starting to gel.
Well, this week, obviously, tomorrow they have Michigan, and they have what, Wisconsin Friday, Saturday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Michigan comes into town on Tuesday. Everyone loves a good old Michigan Notre Dame rivalry here. Actually, I think the hockey is more of a rivalry between these two teams than the football is. That's just my opinion.
Well, this is the first time we've seen Michigan's hockey team since the outside game on the 5th of January.
Since Let's Take It Outside, where they fell in that game inside the stadium. Absolutely correct. So looking for a little bit of vengeance.
Well, this is a big game for Notre Dame. I mean, they need to win this. You know, obviously, like you said, they're not going to win the regular season conference, but they need to get some momentum going before the postseason gets here. And to this point, they've dropped 2 against Michigan this season. They've only won 1 back in November. It was a 6-2 game. But I mean, you can't afford to drop another game to Michigan going into that last stretch of the season with Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Penn State on the docket.
Well, even more so is the fact of the national discussion. They're currently ranked 14th in the country. So I believe the top 16 teams are the ones that get invited into the tournament. So you either got to go and play really well the rest of the way and you improve in the rankings. You go out and you do very well in the Big Ten Conference Championship game. And you're going to have to improve that overall ranking to see if you make the tournament. So there's a lot of work to be done in a little period of time.
Well, George, speaking of one team who, obviously isn't going to win their conference in the regular season, we move on to another team who might not even make the postseason with the Notre Dame men's basketball team. They got a win yesterday against Georgia Tech in a 69-59 final. But I mean, what do they have to do to at least make, an NIT run, or I mean, where do they go from here?
Well, it's a tough thing to say. You're going to have to make a great run in the ACC tournament. I believe the ACC gets an automatic bid into the tournament. It's going to be really tough. They're probably, if anything, going to be an NIT team. That they'll end up playing in that tournament. But the only way right now they would guarantee themselves a shot is to go out and win the ACC tournament, and that's a big deal for this team. Right now you have 4 freshmen that are playing, and your freshman Prentice Hub. What a name, by the way, Prentice Hub.
I love it. My favorite name on the team.
He's second in minutes played on his team as a freshman. So my observation, sometimes you got to go through these tough spells, but if you can weather the storm and look forward to what's coming down the road, I think much better days are in line for this Notre Dame basketball team.
Well, and for those listening at home, this is probably going to get much worse to finish out the season before it gets better. You know, they have a matchup with Virginia, Virginia Tech, Florida State, and Louisville, all still left on the schedule. Not to mention, you know, like you said, the ACC tournament.
Yep.
This isn't an easy road they have to travel. And, you know, like you said, I think that in the long term it benefits the Fighting Irish. You know, these young freshmen, they're going to get some good experience against very, very talented opponents. And, you know, we'll see how they grow and learn from that. And, you know, really excited for the next few years in South Bend.
Yeah, and the only part of it is that you had another one of the freshmen go down. Carmody went down with a labrum injury. And when Rex Pfluger goes down with the injury, and that's kind of a tough. And then you have Elijah Burns, who left the program. So in the end, when you look at the season and how they're doing, I kind of give them credit. They've gone out and they've played. They've had their battles. But when you have talent that's lost, it's really hard to fill those gaps. So I think that the future is bright for the Notre Dame men's basketball. I just think right now they just got to weather the storm and see what happens here towards the end of the season.
Well, George, kind of using that as a segue here, I want to maybe throw a little bit of a curveball at you.
Sure.
Obviously, I know you love these. Obviously, with football this year, we saw the main stage introduction of what they call the transfer portal. You know, you talked about Burns leaving the team, and he didn't do it in this manner, so to speak, that the football players are doing. And this didn't really affect Notre Dame so much this year. But what are your thoughts on the transfer portal? There's been a lot of concern with the fact that, you know, there's really no timetable after the season ends for these guys. They can put their name in and, you know, stay in there indefinitely. Do you see that as a problem, and do you see that ever affecting Notre Dame?
It depends on the commitment of the guy that's looking to get out. If you got eligibility left, and these are the conversations Coach Kelly talks about at the end of the season. He sits down with all the players. They talk about who's coming in, what's next year looking like. So it depends. I know I'm going to declare myself in the transfer portal. I'm going to see if it works, but I doubt it. But it's something that's going to be used, but it's all done with considerations at the end of the season when the coach talks with the players about where the team's going for the next year. So to me, it's really not a surprise when you hear these guys going to go, you know, I'm going to put myself through the transfer portal and see what's going on. So it's here to stay.
I think my biggest issue with it, and I think the problem that needs addressed, is, first of all, any player can put their name into the portal, and like I said, they stay there indefinitely. So what that, to me, tells their teammates is, hey, I don't really know that I'm bought in here, and I don't know that I want to be here. And, you know, we don't want to get into whether or not schools should pay athletes, because that's a whole other rabbit hole within itself. But what happens is you have these guys who have professed that, you know, maybe they're interested in going somewhere else, and the school's still housing them, still feeding them, you know, still educating them. So it kind of creates a problem there. And then twofold, it also creates a problem that we've seen at some of these bigger, you know, schools like Notre Dame and Alabama. And not, like I said, not so much Notre Dame, but especially Alabama this year. They had a lot of players leave. And what you run into is you have these talented freshmen that are recruited, and they sit behind a junior or a senior and don't play much that year because they're being coached and they're being, you know, molded into players that can make an impact at the college level. And they decide it's not for them. They want to move on. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. You know, I think it's great that these players have more freedom to move around, but I think there needs to be some tweaks made moving forward.
I'm all about you've signed on with the program, you know, you sign on the dotted line. You know that you're going to sit behind somebody and, something's going to happen down the road. You may get some playing time earlier, but you make a commitment, and that's kind of like life. You commit to something, you got to see it through. And now with this transfer portal, it kind of gives you an out when it's not working for you.
Well, that's kind of like this show. I signed up to do it with you, but for anybody out there listening, I want to let you all know that I'm in the transfer portal, so you can reach out to me directly, and I would love to hear your offers.
I wish they would. I wish some people would see my name in the transfer portal.
Well, I logged in and deleted it. Don't worry. So I guess the last thing we really need to finish up with here, George, is obviously Notre Dame baseball. Don't want to get too much into it. The season hasn't started yet, but for those of you who don't know, the season does start relatively quickly. If I'm not mistaken, I think that it will start before we record again. Am I wrong, George? I think it's the 15th.
I believe you're correct. And they start out in the wonderful warm weather of Arizona.
Yeah, I actually have Arizona State, the 15th. So this coming Friday. So they will have 3 games under their belt before we broadcast again. So definitely next week on the show, we'll dive into some Notre Dame baseball and kind of see where their season projects to go this year. And it'll be good.
And I think we can actually bring up one of our football guys in that discussion, Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
2-sport guy, football and baseball, and starting pitcher. So we get to talk a little football when baseball starts.
Speaking of football and baseball, guys, look out for a pretty interesting article coming this week on Sports Media Pass about a Notre Dame great on the football field who was actually drafted in the MLB several years back. Probably won't guess who it is, but we'll see. So keep a lookout for that. As always, this has been Irish Rewind. Thank you for listening. George, where can they find you?
You guys can find me at shakedownthethundersports.com. You can find me at Shakedown the Thunder Sports on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook.
You can find me at Sports Media Pass or the nearest Buffalo Wild Wings. As always, thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Go Irish.